Here we are again. Let's talk about some bestsellers, shall we? 2022 has seen the release of many bestseller books that have been extremely popular across all social media platforms. So here I just want to discuss very briefly my experience with some of the books that I have acquired. My first choice, without a doubt, is The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Li Tan. And this is one of the best books that I've read in 2022 so far. Not only because I'm a huge fan of Asian dramas, but because it is beautifully written with a magical ambience that quickly transports you into a world full of legends and dragons and immortals. And this book follows up our protagonist, Xin Yin, who, despite being raised in captivity, once the awakening of her magical aura puts her and her mother in danger, she is forced to leave her home and embark on a very long journey to obtain her mother's freedom. Now, while she is able and more than capable to blend in her new setup and gain opportunities as she disguises herself as an orphan with no family and no connections, she is able to secure the companionship and loyalty of a prince and a job in the military that gains her a lot of friends, taking a path that has many perils and heartaches. And although Xin Yin sees herself involved in many conniving plots and struggles of power as well as a love triangle, she emerges hopeful and stronger. So to me, this book was definitely a page turner with rich velvety descriptions and well-developed sidelines. Now, if you want to find a fault in the plot, I would say that despite the book being called The Daughter of the Moon Goddess, the relationship between daughter and mother was rather weak. Sure, Xin Yin, sacrifices her own life to gain the emperor's forgiveness, but the mother connection came across a bit cold. But despite that, there are so many insightful and deep quotes throughout this book that it's impossible not to fall in love and devour the pages wanting to know more. Now, the sequel, it is my understanding that is meant to be released in November of this year, so I will be definitely placing my pre-order so I get to know how the plot develops and what happens with our lovebirds. So definitely in my book, this is a 5 out of 5, and I'm really looking forward to keep these books on my shelves. My second choice that I decided to buy was Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And Book Lovers follows the story of a very successful agent and a very picky and detailed editor. When a work-related matter brings them together, that first impression doesn't go as well, and they end up assuming the worst about each other's personalities. So when our protagonist, having this habit of overcomplicating her life, believes that her sister's marriage is at risk of dissolving, she agrees to take some time off from work and go on a trip with her. But little does she know is that this trip and all the people that she meets along are the perfect setup to wake her up and make her evaluate her career and her sacrifices so she can fulfill her true desires. On the other hand, this book touches excellent points about certain cliches like career-driven women living in a big city and the idea that if you end up in a small town, you have lost your value and creativity in your profession. So since our protagonist is a non-stop career-minded New Yorker with an ever-growing list of ambitions, she stops a bit to reflect that despite all the money, despite the clients, despite her failed romances, she's missing something, and she needs to know how she can reach her goals. Now, some people have criticized the book in the sense that they say, this is a successful woman, she's she's in her 30s or hitting 30. So why is she having all these insecurities and all these mommy issues? And I would say absolutely not. I mean, this is a woman that lost her mom. Her mom was her pillar. All she has left in life is her sister. She has actually invested in her sister. She sacrificed her youth and what she really wanted to do so her sister could have an education and go to college and live her life and get married. And even when her sister was married, she was supporting her. So there's a level of engagement there. So absolutely, she needs to be engaged and she needs to be part of her sister's life. So I don't see that as mommy issues. I just see that at someone that a very deep level she cares. So this book had just so many elements that made it funny, made it dark, made it sad, made it joyous. So to me, I would say yes, absolutely. I bought the hype. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. Next in line, we have The Book of Night by Holly Black. Here we go again. In The Book of Night, Holly Black does what she knows best. She lures her readers into an urban fantasy full of magical elements with tons of pop culture references and overused feminist characterizations. Now, don't get me wrong, I thought this book was actually more unique than some of her previous works, since this is meant to be more adult-like. And here we follow our main character, who is a former thief and con artist trying to survive as a bartender to help her sister to pay for college. But as a series of murders start happening around town, our protagonist's past comes to life again, and she's tempted once more to dive into her old ways to make a living while putting herself in danger. Now, in terms of the magical element in the story, it has a depth and uniqueness that, as a reader, it caught my attention. Especially when the book implies a rooted connection between shadows that can be awakened and possibly trained to a level of high consciousness, since the shadows feed like an empty vessel of our feelings, emotions, and aptitudes. However, I must point out that to me, the story was more about the criminal intent and power of those seeking to dominate and manipulate others. And although the author sprinkled here and there a little bit of a magical intrigue, she failed to explain or develop the magical intricacies bound to the fantasy of this world with all the characters. So I believe personally that if the author would have cut all those silly, overhyped references and just stuck with clean cuts of characters mooted by their psychological hardships and emotional dislocation, with maybe a parallel on the world ruled by shadow beings, it would have flowed much, much better. It was not bad, but with an open ending and with a protagonist who needs more therapy than magical training, it is definitely, unfortunately, a no keep or follow up for me. So I'm sorry. It was not horrible. I would say it's a 3.0, but definitely it's not going to be the cup of tea of everyone out there. So that's what I have so far with Holly Black. Next in line, we have my second favorite, which is Skandar and the Unicorn Thief by A.F. Stedman? Something like that. So where do I start with this one? This one was so much fun. This book just put a smile on my face. It filled me with warmth and joy and sadness. I felt as if the characters were sharing all their emotions and ups and downs with me. I felt a deep rooted connection and an instant bond with the plot, so it felt very joyous. Now, this story develops around the theme of unicorns bonded with humans and how the bond comes to fruition through training and hard work to then serve, the collective purpose and protect the citizens and the large community against any dark forces. So our protagonist here is a 13-year-old boy that has always dreamt about the chance of having his own unicorn, but his dreams has shattered after he's told that he has been forbidden to take the entrance exam. However, with the help of a stranger, not only does he get elected to the unicorn matching selection, but also learns that no rules applies to him since he's very special and he's destined to this line of work. So, very interesting, right? But on the other hand, soon enough, he finds himself that he needs to confront all his insecurities and obstacles as the magical element that he and his unicorn yield is not only forbidden but also considered treasures. So when the most powerful unicorn in this world gets stolen, this little boy, along with his best friends, find themselves in the middle of a mystery to find the perpetrator and at the same time seeking all the right answers so he can gain confidence and teach himself the true abilities so he can manipulate and train well with his unicorn. This was such a engaging and warming story. It also ends with a open ending, so I would not be surprised to see another sequel. I do not know much about this author, so I don't know if the sequel is meant to happen by the end of this year or maybe sometime in 2023, but I will definitely going to put it on my list because I'm very intrigued. I want to know what's going on, how this relationship with this very special unicorn develops is extremely entertaining. So another 5 out of 5 in my opinion. Another favorite in my selection was Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John. And I haven't read any sci-fi novel in some time, so I came in with no expectations. And it didn't help that we find ourselves reading 3 different stories that in the surface appear to have no relation or no connection with one another, so you end up scratching your head. However, something that caught my attention was that in each one of those stories there was one particular character that was repeated all along, and this is where the plot begins. First, the experiences of a family outcast who has an experience in the forest while he's traveling in Canada, and that experience marks him for life. On the other hand, 100 years later, we see a famous writer who in the middle of a book tour tries to avoid a deadly pandemic that is threatened to erase at least 5% of the moon population and also the population on Earth, whatever is left. And on the other hand, we also have a minor character that is a childhood neighbor whose life is full of secrets due to her parents' past. So when our protagonist is offered this big opportunity to work for a secret government project involving time traveling to investigate and debunk a theory, he learns not only how life on Earth was 100 years ago, but also how the colonies in the moon came about. And he also discovers the truth and how one simple element was able to repeat itself in different timelines. So despite his lack of preparation, because he's not a scientist, by him being able to resolve and caught this issue, it was a big accomplishment accomplishment for him. Now, the reason why this book is so relevant and so prevalent in these times, it's because, first of all, this author, she really knows what she's writing about. The book is very succinct and it gives you a sense of coherence and engagement, and it's well paced. Despite the beginning, being a little confusing, but it's very well paced. And once everything starts taking shape, you just cannot stop reading. You need to know what is going to be next with what's happening in today's life. And, all these talks about plagues and viruses and pandemics and explorations and expansion of human life into another galaxy, another solar system is very engaging and is extremely interesting. So if you like this kind of book, you are truly going to enjoy it. I really loved it. I thought it was a 4 out of 5, 100%. Last but not least, I was able to read Lessons in Chemistry by Bunny Garmis. And this book follows the story of a female scientist who fights against the normal conventions in the professional environment dominated by males in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Our main character is a rational, obstinate, and a straightforward protagonist who will settle for nothing less than her own ways. In her way, she writes the rules and she lives by them. So this is something that you have to respect. And this is in part a product of her past. After going through, many hardships in situations like abandonment and family loss and death and poverty, all these elements taking place in her childhood. But it is not after she is fired from her current job in a lab that the plot really thickens, because once it is known that she is pregnant and that she has no plans to get married, this is a very scandalous thing that happened at the time, so she gets fired. So to pay the bills, she accepts an offer to join a cooking show. And once you reach 150 pages, this is where the lead character truly shows her true intentions of using her chemistry skills combined with the exposure that she gets from the cooking show to, show women their true value and what they are truly capable of. The book is not about, a very cool, hip woman that overcomes a bunch of obstacles and rises triumphant. Sure, that happens, but not in the way that the author wants you to believe. If you are familiar with through history with what is called the second wave of feminism in the 60s and 70s. This book is going to resonate with you a lot because it collects the sentiment of the era for equal pay and equal entrance to the labor market and so forth. So this is positive, but our main character, Elizabeth, in my opinion, is not a proper representation of the real struggles of women in that era. And instead, she plays very elegantly the victim card. I see Elizabeth as smart enough to put herself through college, smart enough to complete a master's degree when other women don't have that opportunity, smart enough to get a job in one of the most renowned labs. And yet she's always trying to dissuade you into thinking that the only reason why she's unable to advance in her professional career is because everyone else, including the system, including, the man hierarchy of the time, including her own limitations as a woman, play against her, making her a victim. Mind you, she was involved in these gruesome sexual harassment attack, and she didn't go to jail. I mean, she did something pretty vile, and she didn't go to jail. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with the elements as they are laid out in the story. But be careful as a reader, because in my opinion, she doesn't lack love. She doesn't lack status. She doesn't lack intelligence. And even the relationship that she has with her own daughter, her role in motherhood is kind of diminished, and the role is kind of put like as a second thought. So I didn't engage. I didn't appreciate this kind of things. I think I understood all the angles of the story. I understood the struggle. I understood the frustration. I understood the cleverness of certain circumstances, but I did not appreciate the misleading of other circumstances to make the character appear to be something that, in my opinion, she's not. So it's a very good read, but it's not a book that I would consider getting in a physical form, to keep in my shelf, or it's not really something that I would recommend to anyone else. 3.5 at the most, so it was mad, but nothing else. So there you have it. 2022 has been very interesting in the literary world. There has been so many good releases, and I'm pretty sure there are plenty of bestsellers and plenty of 5 stars books out there that I need to get my hands on. So if you have any preferences or any bestsellers that I have not read and you have, please feel free to leave any comments or any recommendations in the description down below. And until the next time, take care. Bye bye.